Welcome to the LiiiGHTWAVE podcast, everybody. My name is Luandle Babigizulu Dlamini. I'm the founder of LiiiGHTWAVE. LiiiGHTWAVE is an edtech research and development company based in South Africa, Port Elizabeth, South Africa, and it's founded by me. At the moment, it's just me and the company. And I started this podcast because I wanted to go into some of the things that I'm working on and what I envision for the company in the long term. And yeah, to give you a basic breakdown of our processes and what we do and what we hope to achieve in the future. But I'm going to start by giving a brief introduction to myself. I myself am a front-end developer at the moment. I'm training to become a data scientist. I'm doing a course at the moment, and I'm also doing a computer science online degree with the University of London. But before that, I was studying a degree in history and politics at Rhodes University. I dropped out in my final year, but I was very interested in history, and I carried that interest in history forward a little bit later. It would come to influence one of the biggest projects that we're working on for LiiiGHTWAVE at the moment, which is Project Alexandria. So I am a Swazi South African. I was born in South Africa, but my parents are Swazi. And Swaziland is the Kingdom of Eswatini. That's what it's known as now. Very small place, but a very beautiful place. And yeah, we moved here when I was around grade 3. And I started studying at a primary school called Cowan House. Cowan House, I was at boarding school there, so yeah, I met most of my first friends there. Some of them would be friends that I would even go on to have in high school. And for high school, primary school, I moved around to a couple of different schools as well, including Cornwall Hill College, and Selborne Primary. And yeah, high school I went to Hilton College, and graduated from Hilton College in 2015. And I began my career at Rhodes University in 2016, again studying politics and history. At the time I was making music. I was very interested in music. I met a lot of my first friends just through producing music, and also just in residence, of course. But that was really the defining feature of my first few years of university, was making music. Although I was studying at the same time, I was mainly aiming to have a career in music. And that sort of changed over time, but my love for it hasn't changed. I still have the equipment that I used to make music. I'm actually using it to do the podcast right now, and I think the skills definitely didn't go to waste. But during university, around, let's say, 2019, I had a conversation with my cousin, who was also my best friend. Best friend of about 20 years right now. And we wanted to make a music-based video game called Wave Space. We also had an idea for a platform called Wave Space, which was a completely separate idea, but we had a couple of different ideas at the time about where we wanted to take the idea. And yeah, this music-based video game that we wanted to create was basically like, the concept was you'll be an artist and then you would get your power-ups from your producer, who would be like the Merlin of the game, if you know Merlin from from the Arthurian legends, right? So he would be like the sage. So the sages would be producers, and the artists would be like these heroes, right, going on a journey. And you would collect different production pieces, and you would fight using those different pieces of production. Like, imagine fighting with like an 808, for example. So that was the idea, and that prompted me to start learning computer science, start learning programming. And so the first language I tried to pick up was actually C sharp. So 2019, I look into it a little bit, but I didn't really take it seriously because my laptop was still slow at the time. I had a very slow laptop that time, so it wasn't like ideal for doing that. So I didn't really follow through with it, but I sort of began the process of looking into it and watching like YouTube videos on C sharp. And 2020, come the pandemic, we had a lot of time spent at home. So during that time at home, I it was the lockdown time, of course. I delved into that programming, to the programming a little bit more, and started doing tutorials on C sharp. I had a new laptop at this time, luckily, so that I had gotten for my birthday, so I could actually program on it and get some outputs. So I downloaded Unity and started programming with C sharp, and programmed just like a basic game following a YouTube tutorial. And from there, I somehow fell into programming in JavaScript. I just kept on hearing that that was the way to go, online, of course. So I followed suit and I went to JavaScript and I went the web development route because I wanted to develop web apps. And sort of the idea of the game took a backseater because I don't know, I just made that transition to web app development and wasn't really cognizant of the fact that I wouldn't really be able to use that to make the game that I wanted to make initially. But that's like the rabbit hole of programming. And yeah, so go down this rabbit hole. I'm also at the same time learning 3D modeling with Blender. So I learned that, of course, because you need to make prefabs for Unity to design games, to design really good games. So I thought I was going to do that at first. But I continued learning Blender even after I stopped learning C sharp, and continued just designing 3D objects, following tutorials. And yeah, I was pretty much self-taught with 3D modeling and self-taught with programming. Learned JavaScript for about a year, and then I decided to move on to React, which was the front-end framework for JavaScript. And from there, about maybe 2 or 3 years later, I worked on my first really big app, which was an app called Formulae, which was a calculator app, a multidisciplinary calculator app, which allowed you to calculate equations from different subjects, so different like well-known equations from different subjects, and it provided an interface for calculating, for solving those equations, essentially. And this involved commonly used economics equations, physics equations, and accounting equations, right? So I built that. That was my first really big project that I even wrote some documentation on. And I put that out, and that's the first product of LiiiGHTWAVE. And I founded LiiiGHTWAVE in 2022, registered it, and was planning to make Formulae into a business, so make it profitable, but I didn't end up going that route with Formulae. I just thought eventually the app seemed a little bit too simple compared to a lot of the technologies which were coming out at the time. Because around 2023, we were already getting hints of like the chat GPTs, and so on and so forth, the LLMs. So with all those LLMs being developed, it seemed a little bit of an unnecessary technology that I didn't think people were going to pay for. So we didn't end up going the route of commercializing Formulae, but we still have it up and it's still usable. And I'll drop the link to all of our websites and applications after this, which you'll see in the description section of this YouTube video. And around the time I was learning programming, I was reading a book called Computer Science for Everyone. Now, Computer Science for Everyone is just like an introductory book, an introductory text on computer science, and it it goes into the history of computer science a little bit. And this intrigued me because I was still somewhat interested in history, and I history had always intrigued me because it gave you the ability to sort of go into an investigation of what happened in the past using sources, and I was really intrigued by that. It was a really nice process. It was like you got to be a little bit of a detective, solving solving history with little pieces of evidence that you found. And that was sort of the fun in the process. So I was intrigued when I found the history of computers in this book, and it led me down this rabbit hole of like, okay, well, if we can understand the history of a technology, surely we can then understand the different iterations that might have evolved from that technology. So this led me to start collecting data on a bunch of historical technology from different time periods, and I put that data into a data set, which I called the Alexandria data set at the time, based on the Library of Alexandria. One of the most critical books in that project when I was first working on it was a book called Ancient Engineers by L. Sprague de Camp. Really, really good book on the history of engineering, and it has a robust history of engineers, mathematicians, people who were building things and creating things in the past, and architects, of course. So I worked on that for a while, just like adding things to the data set. And about 2024, I decided to bring my cousin on. Or the end of 2023, I decided to bring my cousin on. He was keen to help me on the project, so we worked on it with him. And yeah, he contributed to that data set as well, and we built it together. We would like go over, we would read certain chapters of books, would like allocate chapters of books to each other and be like, okay, you do this chapter, I do this chapter. Let's like highlight everything that we find, every piece of technology that we find in the book, and its inventor, and then let's record that. That was the process essentially. We weren't doing any data scraping at the time. So it was kind of just manually reading books and inputting that data into a spreadsheet, a Google sheet spreadsheet. And yeah, that was the process. And those are the beginnings of our current project, which is Project Alexandria. And we're still in that phase, the data collection phase, although right now I am looking into finding more efficient ways to collect that data, like data scraping and large language models, and doing sentiment analysis and things like that. So that's where I plan to take it next. But we're still very much in the early phases of Alexandria. I planned it out to be more like a 10-year project. And my initial idea was that, we can turn this into a full interactive world that you can go into and interact with ancient historic sites, and basically see what that site looks like at different periods of time, and be able to explore it and find different tidbits of history. But that is a little bit complex, so that's a very, very long-term goal, like even further than the 10 years, I think. But I think with technology advancing as quickly as it is, we can definitely get that done in the future if we get the foundations right. Right now, we're just working on Alexandria as a tool for historians to analyze their historical texts and come up with compelling narratives about how particular moments of history happened based on the data. There is a field of research called cliodynamics, which is focused on the sort of analysis of history through more statistical methods. So we're looking into doing that. But obviously there are a number of complications. History is a very subjective subject. So, there are a number of complications regarding both ethics and the practicality of doing something so subjective, using tools that were made for more objective pieces of data, tools and methods which are meant for more objective data. So these are sort of the hurdles that we have to overcome in developing the idea. But I'm fully confident that we'll come to a conclusion with this application that that works with the type of data that we're working with. So it may not look exactly like how we planned for it to look in the beginning, but I'm pretty certain that we'll come to something that's quite compelling and quite interesting to use. And yeah, that is partly what this podcast is all about. It's about delving into the process of building this application and sort of demystifying it and putting it out there, putting our thoughts out there about what might be possible with the application of the technology. And of course, inviting people to come and contribute to the project. The project is an open source project. So we're inviting developers and historians to come and work on the project, to apply to LiiiGHTWAVE. We haven't opened applications for careers just yet, but we will soon. And if you do want to open source contribute, just reach out to us on the email that I provide in the description section of this video. And yeah, we'll have a conversation. We'll talk about what you might be able to contribute and how we might be able to go forward. But yeah, at the moment, it is just me working on this project. I do get help every now and again from my cousin, my best friend, and I'm very open to any different ideas about which direction that this could go. I'm just interested in putting a tool that for the first time gives people the ability to understand history and see history in high fidelity and in depth and understand it in a way that's a little bit more hands-on than before, and a little bit more and perhaps a little bit more visual eventually. If we can create worlds which replicate historical time periods, that's effectively like creating a little time machine, I guess you could say. So it sounds crazy, but that's really, in the far future, that's really what this type of technology could turn into. And those are my hopes for this technology, to be able to help people explore different periods of time in depth using all the data that we have. But for now, we're working on it as a tool for historians, and we're looking to collaborate with universities and schools who want to use the product, and universities who want to contribute to the product, whether it be through vetting the information that we have, vetting our data, and acting as a sort of acting as oversight to our project, helping us to regulate it and make sure that we're putting out information which is accurate and not false information. That's a really big thing. We're also calling on ethicists and philosophers, because a project like this does bring about many ethical problems, many philosophical questions about whether we should even be doing this type of project. So we're calling anybody who has ideas regarding this to come and have a discussion with us, and we can move forward from there. And yeah, that can only make the project better. So that is what we're working on at the moment. and that's Project Alexandria. I'm going to continue doing this podcast, covering the different aspects of the Alexandria. This was just an introduction to the project, but please keep coming back to the podcast. You might have guests on here, and yeah, please subscribe to my Patreon as well. I'll put the link to the Patreon in the description, and you will get early access to the podcasts at some point. Not yet. So this has not started yet, but when the podcast grows a little bit, and yeah, we're inviting patrons to contribute to our Patreon page. And yes, historians. If you're an historian, we would definitely like to speak to you because we're looking for historians to help us read through all these books. As I said, we're currently doing this manually, so it's it would be very helpful to have as many people involved in the project as possible, just to be able to get as much data down as possible. We have a lot of reading to get through, as you might expect. So yeah, that's where we're at the moment. But this is the LiiiGHTWAVE podcast. Thank you very much for coming on and having a listen. And I hope you come back for the next episode. But thank you very much for coming. Please hit that subscribe button and please turn on notifications so that you get notified whenever we drop a new video. And yes, thank you very much for coming through. Have a great day, everybody. Bye.